Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum, my dear students. Today we are going to talk about the Romantic period in the history of English literature that was started in 1785 and ended up in 1830. So my dear students, here you can see previously when we were talking about classical literature, so now we'll do the comparison of classical literature along with the Romantic period in the history of English literature. So with the passage of time you can see how the trends are being changed. Okay dear students, this is your lecture number 3 and the class is History of English Literature, ComSat's Virtual Campus, Islamabad. This is the lecture agenda for today. We'll talk about basically Romanticism in general, that is basically a movement across the arts. So basically my dear students, here you can see we are not going to talk about Romanticism only in terms of literature here. Basically that is what do we mean by Romanticism in general, because it has too many influences on other domains as well. Fine, so we'll talk about it in detail. So basically today's lecture is for Romanticism in general. Okay. Here dear students, this is the definition of Romanticism. It refers to a movement in arts, literature and music during the 19th century. So basically this is a movement which was started in the 19th century, okay, and you can see that this movement was started in art and in literature as well. Romanticism is characterized by the 5 I's. So here you can see all the 5 words, they're starting with I. Fine, so basically these are the characteristics of Romanticism in the history of English literature, or if you talk about Romanticism in general. So my dear students, here you'll have to make your mind open, because we are not talking about Romanticism as far as English literature is concerned. Basically we'll check the influence of Romanticism on other domains as well. So you'll have to notice what basically that movement is, and then with the reference to those movement, in the next lecture we'll focus on the poetry of that era. Fine. So basically when we talk about 5 I's, so imagination, Romanticism basically talks about imagination. The other thing is intuition, and the third one is idealism, and the fourth one is inspiration, and the last one is individuality. So my dear students, here we'll talk about all the things in detail: imagination, intuition, idealism, inspiration and individuality. So these are basically the 5 points which you have to keep in mind when you talk about Romanticism. Fine. So here you'll again see a shift from classical literature to Romantic literature. Previously, in the previous age, when we were talking about classical literature, so basically that was there you can see the influence of Greek, Latin and French writings on English literature as well. But here this is we are going to give a new touch to literature here. Okay, so my dear students, will focus on these 5 characteristics of Romanticism, which are also known as 5 I's. Okay, so basically imagination was emphasized over reason. So imagination, when we talk about the first I, that is imagination, so during the romantic movement in in history, that was emphasized over reason. So basically my dear students, here previously when we were talking about classical literature, you had to follow certain rules while producing poetry or novel or drama. So here, or you will have to come up with you have to be within the limits of certain themes while writing any kind of thing. So here my dear students, imagination doesn't have any boundaries. So basically Romanticism focuses on the importance of imagination. This was a backlash against the rationalism characterized by the neoclassical period of Age of Reasons. Here basically we are rejecting the Age of Reason when we talk about imagination, because everything that is based on logic or reason, that is against Romanticism. Okay, we'll draw a comparison as well. Imagination was considered necessary for creating all art. So basically this everything that comes in art. So basically it's you can say a result of creativity. So basically you can see like imagination is very much important, and it plays its an essential role in creativity. If you are not imaginative, if you do not use your imagination while producing any kind of art, so basically you cannot say that that work is art. All right, so dear students, previously when we were talking about imagination, so I gave you an example of S.T. Coleridge, that he called imagination as intellectual intuition. Fine. So here we are on intuition. So according to William Wordsworth, poetry, he was a poet, so according to him, what is poetry? That is a spontaneous overflow of powerful feelings. So your feelings are involved here, imagination plus your feelings. So here we are going in you can say in a systematic way here. First of all, we talked about imagination, importance of imagination in romanticism. Then we are here on intuition. So dear students, according to him, the spontaneous overflow, which is not artificial, which is like you can say which is created on its own, and this is an overflow of powerful feelings. So again we are talking about you know, the second point, that is intuition here. So basically they give more importance to human feelings as compared to reason. So in a way they are rejecting the previous doctrine, that is also called the age of reason and the age of logic. Fine. Idealism, another I in romanticism, that is the concept that we can make the world a better place. So here you can see an optimistic attitude toward the world as well. Okay, you make your ideals, role models, and then you can make a world a better place to live. Idealism refers to any theory that emphasizes the spirit, the mind, or language over matter. Thought has a crucial role in making the world the way it is. So again you can see like they are giving importance to thoughts. So through your thinking, through your thoughts, you can change the world. You can, if you have any idealized world in front of you, so you can make your society like that as well. Okay, Immanuel Kant, a German philosopher, held that the mind forces the world we perceive to take the shape of space and time. So basically he is trying to say everything is in mind's control. So you make your ideals, and then you can make your society yourself in according to that ideal or the force which is behind you, behind that intuition. So here we are over with the third E as well, that is you know, one of the characteristics of the romantic period. Inspiration, this is another characteristic. The romantic artist, musician, or writer is an inspired creator rather than a technical master. So basically you get inspired by somebody, by nature, by the beauty of the world, and then you become the creator. And here you can see that they ignored or they refused the technicality while writing any kind of thing. Fine. So a romantic artist, so basically here my dear students, you can see like we are talking about the artists, the musicians, and the writers as well. So our focus here is on romanticism in general. Okay, what basically that movement is, the focus of that movement. So if we talk about literature, of music, of poetry, so definitely you'll see the influence of romanticism on all the things. What this means is going with the moment or being spontaneous rather than getting it precise. So basically you become spontaneous, you become you can say you do not want to become artificial, or you know, if you are creative then it means you are spontaneous. And here you can see that they are rejecting one more point, that getting it precise. So here indirectly they are focusing on the previous age of reason, the classical age as well, that is getting it precise when they, you know, they focused on the writing, okay, the rules and the regulations with the poets they had to follow while writing any kind of you know, literature at that time. So poet gets, or the artist or the musician gets inspired by something, and then he creates something. So basically here they are saying that the musician, the writer or the artist, they basically are not the technical masters. So here, getting it precise and technical master, both terminologies are okay. So both terminologies here, you can see they are relevant to the previous moment, okay, the classical age, where they focused on certain rules and regulations which the writers, the poets, they had to follow while creating any kind of literature of that time. Fine. So basically this movement, that is a revolution in the history of literature, if you say, or otherwise as well. Instead of focusing on the technical matters, on getting precision in your writing, they focused on like inspiration. Okay. So individuality, they give importance to individuality as well. Romantics celebrated the individual. During this time period, women's right and abolitionism were taking roots as major movements. So here focus was on individuality. One more thing. So my dear students, what you have to do now is, by keeping in view the characteristics how this movement is different from the previous periods, so definitely you'll have to keep in mind these things, and then we'll draw comparison as well. Walt Whitman, a later romantic writer, would write a poem entitled Song of Myself. It begins, I celebrate myself. So you can see the reflection of individuality in their writings as well. So here this is an introduction to another poet of that era. Fine. So my dear students, here you can see instead of focusing on groups or you can say different societies, they used to give importance to individuality. Fine. So what basically one person is, so you'll have to analyze their points by keeping in view the subjectivity and the importance of individual in their writings as well. Fine. Okay, Romanticism, we'll talk about its origin now. Romanticism began to take root as a movement following the French Revolution. Okay, the publication of lyrical ballads by William Wordsworth and S.T. Coleridge in 1792 is considered the beginning of literary romanticism. So my dear students, here you can see the romantic period was started with the publication of the lyrical ballads by S.T. Coleridge and William Wordsworth. Okay, and then we gave it a name, the romantic movement or the literary romanticism in the history of English literature. So it is followed by the French Revolution in the English society. Okay, so Romanticism again is not just restricted to literature only. So this is basically a movement across all the arts, visual arts, music and literature. So basically literature is one part of art, so it covers, Romanticism covers other aspects as well, like the visual art or the music as well. Fine. All of the arts embrace themes prevalent in the Middle Ages. Chivalry, courtly love, literature and art from this time depicted these themes. Music, ballads and operas illustrated these themes. Okay, Shakespeare came back into vogue. So my dear students, here you can see that this is a revival of the courtly love again here basically. So you can see, like, with the passage of time, some of the things which we adopted or which English society they adopted, or which they have taken from the previous ages, so those things are mentioned over here as well. So the things which Romanticism took from the Middle Ages were chivalry, courtly love, and you can see the clear-cut reflection of courtly love and chivalry, or you can see otherwise they became more closer to nature as well. So basically these are their themes, and which are presented in their ballads and operas. Fine. The themes which are present in Shakespearean you can say plays, you can see the revival of those themes again in the Romanticism. So they came into fashion once again during the Romantic period. All right. Visual arts. Neoclassical art was rigid, the previous art, sphere and unemotional. It harken back to ancient Greece and Rome. Why the previous era in the history of English literature is known as classical era? Because they were following the Greece and the Roman traditions in their writings. So that is why you can see like their art that was rigid, that was severe, and that was unemotional. They ignored emotional, and there wasn't any flexibility in their art. So when we talk about romantic art was emotional, so it is opposite to the rules and regulations which the classical authors they used to follow. Deeply felt, individualistic and exotic. It has been described as a reaction to neoclassicism or anti-classicism. Here, my dear students, this is a reaction. Romanticism, basically, that is a reaction to neoclassicism, or you can give this neoclassicism a name Romanticism is also known as anti-classicism because they totally rejected the old doctrine that was followed by the classical writers in the previous era. So my dear students, here what you have to do is like by keeping in view what were the beliefs and what were the methods which neoclassical artists they used to follow, and what are the new trends here you can see in the romantic art. Fine. So it is basically full of emotions and that is deeply felt as well, that has an individualistic element as well, and this is exotic. So here again in a way we are talking about the characteristics of the romantic era in history. Fine. So my dear students, here you can see neoclassical art, basically that is unemotional, like when you talk about their plays, they were performed on a stage, and there wasn't any life, and they dealt with they always dealt with the boring and the kind of you can say uncrispy kind of themes at that time. So romantic art you can see in this picture, like romantic art is basically this is about nature. So you can see like this is from the world, like outside nature, elements of nature you can see here, and here this is a picture from the stage, and you can see like that might be dependent upon any boring theme. Okay, so here romantic art that is full of emotions, full of life. So this is a comparison of the visual arts of neoclassical period and of romantic period. Okay, as far as music is concerned, classical musicians included composers like Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart and Franz Joseph Haydn. So here you can see like these were basically the composers, and they again used to follow certain traditions and the rules and regulations in order to compose music. Romantic musicians included composers like Frederick Chopin, Franz Liszt, Piotr Ilyich Tchaikovsky. So basically these are the musicians of the romantic period. Okay, music components. Classical music, okay, from you can say 1730 to 1821, people they used to follow the same traditions at that time. From 1730 to 1820, classical music emphasized internal order and balance. If we talk about romantic music, that emphasized expression of feelings. So here, my dear students, order and balance, certain rules and regulations the classical musicians they had to follow during that era, and focus was on the expression of feelings during the romantic era. Fine. Okay, here my dear student, let me remind you, we are talking about the history of English literature. So here this is your point, the very important point. Previously when we were talking about the visual arts, other arts and the music, so these are basically not your domains, but we are taking romanticism as a broader term, and we have checked its influence on the other domains as well. So here we are going to talk about the literature in romanticism, or the importance of literature in the romantic era. In America, romanticism most strongly impacted literature. Writers explored supernatural and gothic themes. You can see like the writers of that era, they talk about nature, love and romance. So basically you can find out a few important points in this slide. One is they were inclined towards supernatural and gothic themes, and the other thing is, which is very much common about the romantic poets and the writers that they wrote about nature, love and romance, okay, and you can say most of their poetry that is about nature. All right, so that is all about literature. So 6 poets were singled out as the embodiment of romantic period that was started in 1785 officially, and ended up in 1830. Fine. So some eminent poets which which rule the romantic era in the history of English literature were William Wordsworth, Lord Byron, Samuel Taylor Coleridge, John Keats, Percy Bysshe Shelley and William Blake. So here, my dear students, you can see like these are the full names of all the poets of that era, okay, and they are also known as the romantic poets. All right, so we'll talk about their works in detail. All right, as you have probably noticed, the poets are all males. You may have heard of them before, but have you heard of these poets who are active in the same period? So here, dear students, you'll have to notice, okay, like some other poets, all the names, they are basically of males. So where is the element of individuality here? Women rights movement was going on during that period as well. So Anna Barbauld, Charlotte Smith, Mary Robinson. So have you heard of these poets who were also active during this period or not? Obviously not. Whenever we talk about the romantic period in the history of English literature, so we would talk about Wordsworth, Coleridge, Byron, Keats, and not. We are not much familiar with these 3 names. So I'll tell you why. All right. These 3 women poets were well known at the time that the other male poets were writing, and Wordsworth and Coleridge were almost unknown. They learned their craft or parts of their craft from 3 women. So basically these are the 3 ladies like Anna Barbauld, Charlotte Smith, Mary Robinson. So you can see, my dear students, basically these are the names of 3 female poets. So they were very well known when Wordsworth and Coleridge, they were not much famous, and basically they took the basics from these 3 female poets for their poetry. So the period was dominated by a number of historical events as well. This period in the history of English literature is very much important because it is you can say dominated by a number of other historical events as well, okay. So why did we give it this name romantic? Because you can see the focus of the poets and the authors of that time, it was changed after the classical era in the history of English literature, and now we'll talk about other events which are involved in making this era. The French Revolution that was happened in 1785, and the Declaration of the Rights of Man. Fine. So these are basically 2 historical events: urbanization and enclosure, okay, industrialization and invention. So basically you can see these few things which are very much important, and these are these have contributed in the making of this romantic period as well. So these are known as the historical events as well. Number one is the French Revolution, the other one is the Declaration of the Rights of Man, and the third one is urbanization, and the fourth one is industrialization. So we'll talk about all these historical events in detail now. Before the French Revolution, it was the common doctrine over there that the property must be equally distributed. So after the French Revolution, it was you can say they denied the fact, okay, they denied this concept to equally distribute the property among the individuals, okay. So definitely this idea of distributing the property began to lose its supporters after the French Revolution in 19th century. All right. The execution in France under Robespierre, the September massacres of the nobility, the execution of the king and the queen, and the reign of terror where thousands were guillotined, and the invasion of other countries brought France and England into war. So basically that was the historical event which was going on during that period, which is known as the Romantic era in the history of English literature. So my dear students, you can find out the information from the link which is available here on the slide. All right. Wordsworth refers to the events in the Prelude, first published in 1850. So my dear students, here you could see like All the historical events relevant to the French Revolution, urbanization and industrialization in the English society at that time, Wordsworth addressed all those events in the Preludes, which was first published in 1850. And here you can see like this is an extract from his writing, that is the Prelude. Okay, has become oppressors in their turn, Frenchmen has changed a war of self-defense for one of conquest, losing sight of all which they had struggled for. So my dear students, here you can see like they addressed all the events in their poetry. Okay, all the poets of that time, they addressed it, and you can see a clear reflection of the French Revolution in the writing, that is the Prelude, which is written by William Wordsworth, and you can see like how he has addressed that event. All right, so Napoleon, the champion of the French Revolution, had become a despot, and the spirit of the revolution which was lost. Okay, so the rest of the information, the detailed information, you can get from this link. So here you can see the picture of Napoleon as well. Okay, so basically he is the champion of the French Revolution as well, and he provided the spirit of the revolution, and which was lost later on. So we'll discuss about it as well. Urbanization and enclosure, another thing which is important when we were talking about the other historical events which were involved in making the Romantic period. The largely agricultural society of England changed to a manufacturing society, and power-driven machinery replaced labor by hands. Okay, here my dear students, you can see like the agriculture society was converted into the manufacturing society, and the power driven machinery replaced labor by hands. So here dear students, like with the concept of urbanization, most of the agriculture society, like they converted it into the manufacturing society. You can see like the machinery took place in that era, and it replaced the labors as well. So people, like with the passage of time, you can say with the advancements of technology as well, you can see like how did they replace agriculture with the manufacturing society, plus they replaced the machinery with they replaced the they replaced the labors with machinery of that time. All right. The movement from agriculture to manufacturing meant that urbanization took place, and the mill towns population exploded. So typical cottage, here you can see like that was basically a typical cottage where people used to live in order to survive in the society. And the mill town, here you can see like the smoke is here, all right, because that is you can say like people, they moved towards the cities, and you can say previously when they used to live in the cottages, they had agriculture as their profession at that time. When they moved towards the cities, so they adopted other professions as well. So this is known as mill cottage, and this is an example of the mill town, and the other example if that is of a typical cottage. So these two pictures, these are taken from the links which are provided here below. This movement of people from agriculture areas to towns was aided by a process of enclosure. The checkerboard of field enclosed by hedges or stone walls that are evident in many parts of England are the result of this. So my dear students, here you can say that the whole process of aiding or providing aids to the people who are living in the cottage houses, you can see that is like when they shifted towards the urbanization or the urban area or the mill towns, so the whole process is known as enclosure. All right, so here you can see what happened afterward, after urbanization. Like you can see the walls here as well, which are made up of edges, and these are also known as the stone walls as well, and these are evident in many parts of England, which are the result of that, like as a result of the checkerboard of fields of that time. So you can see the hedges and the stone walls there. All right. More efficient methods of agriculture meant communally worked farms were converted to privately owned farms, and the landless class emerged who moved into the towns. All right, so here basically people who didn't have any kind of land while living in the cottage area as well. So they moved towards the towns because they didn't have any land, so they didn't have any fear to leave their homes at that time, fine. So basically that was the very low class, the landless class, which moved towards the cities, and you can see the revolution as well. All right, so basically from agriculture to industrialization, okay, or to the manufacturing society, basically this is the concept which was happening there at that time. All right, industrial revolution and invention. Steam power replaced wind power, and the power to run the manufacturing industries was produced by water. Okay, so previously you can see like they had their tools which they used to run on, you know, wind power at that time, so it was replaced with the steam power. All right, okay, and the power to run the manufacturing industries was produced by water. Okay, so here you can see the steam train and the Watt steam engine as well, the two examples of the of steam power of that time. Okay, and the manufacturing industries, they were produced by water, so they utilized the natural sources, that is water as well. So they replaced wind power and they introduced the steam power during that era. So we are talking about the industrial revolution and invention in the 19th century. All right, the economic philosophy of laissez-faire or the let alone theory in economics meant that the economy would be left to run itself and the government should not interfere. So basically this is the economical philosophy, that you'll have to keep the finance department of your country separated from the government, and the government should not interfere in the financial matters of the country. Okay, so basically they had to make their workers skilled in, like, as far as the manufacturing society is concerned. So at that time it was a common belief that government should not interfere in the financial matters of the society. Okay, so this is basically a part of the theory in economics at that time. All right, let alone, basically this letting alone is separating both the domains. One is of government and the other one is economy. So basically you are separating both the things. Government is not allowed to interfere in the financial matters of the country. So this is to keep a boundary within government and the financial matters. All right, the consequences of this economic philosophy were many: inadequate wages, long hours of work, harsh discipline and bad working condition, the large-scale unemployment of women and children. The family worked together as a unit before. So previously, while focusing on the individuality, everybody is responsible, fine. So basically here you can see, like, previously the whole family used to work together as a unit. So now you can see a large scale of women and children that they were unemployed that area in that era, and inadequate wages because there wasn't any proper distribution of salaries among the workers, and the long hours of work, harsh discipline and bad working conditions as well. So basically these are the people who were landless at that time, and they moved towards the cities. And what happened there, like, they had to work for hours, and they had to follow the harsh rules and regulations, and they had the bad working conditions as well. So these are basically the consequences of the economical philosophy of that time, which was like, you'll have to both the domains must be different. Government should not interfere in the economical affairs of the country. So these are the results of the economical philosophy of that time. All right, gendered working rule came into play at this time, and poor houses put children to work. So the poor children, they were put to work, okay, by force at that time. All right, petitions, protest meetings, hunger rights, the workers had no vote, and it was illegal to form unions. So basically they do not have the power to utilize their vote. All right, and that is why it was illegal to form unions at that time. Okay, oppressive measure by the ruling class. So the ruling class, it used to suppress the lower class or the working class of that time. All right, so basically these are the possible consequences, these are the consequences of the, you can say, when they converted agriculture society into the manufacturing society. Okay, what were the consequences? Because the government was not allowed to interfere in the financial matters of the country. So these are the basically the possible consequences of that time. The ruling class, it used to oppress, you can say, the working class of that time. All right, sorry, the introduction of new machinery led to more unemployment and attempts to destroy the machinery. A spinning jenny, this is the name of a machinery. All right, so basically when you introduce machinery into the market or into the industry, so what happens? Definitely you replace that machinery, you replace human beings with that machinery. So my dear students, here you can see like providing machinery or getting advanced in machinery or in technical things, it led them towards unemployment as well, because they had to replace machinery with they had to replace labor with the machinery. All right, so my dear students, you can see the possible consequences of that time here. The House of Lords passed a bill in 1812 that sentenced anyone who destroyed weaving machinery to a death penalty. So here you can see, my dear students, like weaving, destroying any kind of machinery, the punishment of that person would be death if they found anybody. So that was basically a bill which was passed by the House of Lords in 1812. So this is the copy of the bill you can also see. All right, so in the other picture you can see a person is having a kind of weapon in his hands and he is ready to kill the other person. So this is the pictorial description of, you can say, like giving death to somebody who destroys any kind of machinery at that time. So it was a bill that was passed in 1812. All right. As the poor suffered, the landed classes and industrialists prospered and the British Empire expanded. So here you can see, although the working class of that time, it was suffering a lot and they were a victim of the ruling class or the landed class of that time. Like as the poor people, they were suffering. On the other hand, the landed class or the ruling, you can say, the class of the society, it got expanded with the passage of time. So you can see, like how did they give employment to the people? Basically that was a proper agenda or politics that was being played at that time. So dear students, you'll have to notice over here that was a kind of agenda which they were following at that time. First of all, they make all the cities manufacturing cities, instead of, like, they replaced agriculture with the manufacturing society, and then they replaced the labors with the machinery. All right, so here you can see, like, with the passage of time, you can say the poor, they were suffering, and the ruling class or the landed classes of the society or the British Empire expanded with the passage of time. All right. Influences of the Romantic poets. So here we are gradually moving towards Romantic poets. The distress of working class and everyday life. The move from agriculture and nature to the overfilled towns and industrialization. The Romantic idea of the French Revolution. These influences led to what we call the spirit of the age. So basically this is the spirit of the age of that time, because you can see the distress of the working class was there, and their poetry is almost based on everyday life experiences on nature. A shift from or a move from agriculture to the industrialization, you can see in most of their poems it would be present, and they followed the Romantic idea which was given by the French Revolution. All right, that is why this is known as the spirit of the age as well. Okay, so basically these are some of the influences, and these are very much present in their writings as well. What is basically the spirit of the age? A sense that there were a new intellectual climate, a release of energy that was captured by experimentation and creative power and accompanied by a spirit of political and social revolution. A French Revolution had given rise to a time of promise and revolution that was expressed in the poetry of the time. Traditions and customs were discarded and new ideas and renewal for the future. You'll have to notice one more thing here, that what is basically the spirit of that age. Okay, there was an intellectual climate at that time, at least they sensed it. All right, and then creative power and spirit of political and social revolution. So here you can see during this era they realized their importance, and then you can see like they wanted to utilize their creative power, and they had the spirit of political and social revolution at that time. The French Revolution had given rise to a time of promise and revolution that was expressed in the poetry of that time. So whatever basically is happening in that very particular society, you can see the influence of all the things on the poetry of that time as well. Traditions and customs were discarded. So here the question arises, which traditions and customs? The classical traditions, okay, as they were following the Greece and the Roman traditions at that time, the rules of writing any kind of thing, the regulations, okay, or the norms which they had to follow while producing poetry or any other kind of literature. So my dear students, here you'll have to notice that and new ideas and renewal were the future. So my dear students, these are some of the beliefs of the Romantic period of that time. There was an intellectual climate, there was a promise and a revolution by the French Revolution, all right, and that was expressed in the time, in the poetry of that time. Plus they discarded they violated all the traditions and the customs which the classical authors they used to follow in their writings, and the new ideas and renewal were the future at that time. Renewal were the future at that time. So my dear students, what you have to focus here is that this approach or this movement, this is absolutely against the previous one, all right. So basically they have the hope at that time, and you can see like they wanted to have a change as far as their political and social conditions were concerned at that time, because the working class at that time was a very submissive class. They had to follow the orders by the landed class, and you can see, as previously we have discussed, that the British Empire, it expanded with the passage of time, and they were suppressing the working class of that time. So my dear students, they had the hope, romantic poets and the writers, they had the hope at that time to bring new ideas, to bring a revolution in the society, all right. Before the Romantic period, poetry was considered to be an intimation of life or a mirror held up to nature. But Wordsworth, for example, saw poetry as a spontaneous overflow of powerful feeling, thus reversing the previous idea. So basically, before the Romantic period started, previously they used to take poetry as an intimation of life, or it is just a mirror held up to nature. So here basically this is just an imitation of life, all right. This is just a copying of life, what is happening in the society. You just imitate the things and then you produce it in form of poetry. So basically, poetry, or you can say other forms of literature, they are just mirrors held up to nature. So basically, in a way, they are neglecting the imaginative power of poetry here, the role of nature. The poets, they need to be imaginative. So they were going with the previous or the old doctrine here, that is the imitation of life only, or you can say the Aristotle's poetry of the old ages, all right. So basically this is a point that is relevant to the classical period in the history of English literature. The second part of the slides, you can see how did Wordsworth see poetry? That is the spontaneous overflow of powerful feelings. So this is not imitation of life, or that's not a mirror which you hold in your hands and that is just a kind of nature. rather this is a spontaneous overflow of your powerful feelings. So this is a reversal of the previous ideas as well. Alright, so this is out of control, this is full of imaginations, this is spontaneous, this is not you can say man-made, or this is not artificial kind of thing. This is it grows automatically or naturally. So my dear students, you can see a direct comparison of classical poetry with the romantic poetry here. Wordsworth located the source of a poem inside the individual, instead of the outer world, in the inner feelings, emotion, or the imaginative vision of the author. Okay, basically what Wordsworth did was that, like, instead of focusing on the outer world, on the society, on the imitation of life, on copying the experiences of other people and then producing them in the poetry, he rejected that point and he focused on the individuals. Okay, individual feelings, what is basically inside an individual, the inner feelings and the emotions, or the imaginative vision of the author. So according to him, these are basically the things which are important and which are the soul of your poetry as well. So my dear students, what you have to do here is that focus on the things, like instead of focusing on the outer world, they gave importance to the inner world at that time, and to the inner feelings, to the emotions, and to the imagination. So my dear students, you can see the imagination in literature, that is very much important concept. So romantic literature, it fulfills the purpose of imagination and its importance in literature. So basically they did not focus on group, on nations. Basically a poet as an individual was treated. So my dear students, if you want to write down the biography of the people who belong to the romantic era, so you can, and this is a very, you can say, easy task as well as compared to the rest of the authors who belong to other eras. How? Because you can see the biographical elements, or the element of individuality which is present there, because at that time the focus was on poets and the authors. So dear students, here you can see, like, that is a shift of getting into the outer world to an inner world, okay, to know about the feelings of the imagination and the emotions of a writer, which is you can say a common essence in the romantic era in the history of English literature. Right, there is an insistence on the role of instinct, intuition, and the feeling of the heart over the logical thoughts located in the head. So basically here two points are important. One is logical thoughts located in the head, and feelings, the feelings of the heart. So they gave importance to which thing? The feelings of the heart as compared to the logical thoughts which are located in the head. So my dear students, here you can see, like, how did they focus on the feelings of the heart, okay, the emotional side of a man instead of the logical side of the thinking side of human beings. This change is a deliberate revolt against the 18th century scientific worldview and the dominant poetic tradition of the time. So time and again I'm telling you that today's lecture is basically about romantic moment in history, plus its comparison with the previous age, that is known as the classical period. Fine. So this change is a deliberate revolt against the 18th century scientific worldview. So they rejected the scientific worldview which was present in the 18th century. So my dear students, again let me remind you, we are talking about the 19th century literature, or the 19th century era. Fine. What was basically the dominant poetic tradition at that time? Poets, they had to be within certain rules and regulations in order to produce any kind of thing, okay, what kind of meter they can follow, okay, in order to give a kind of uniformity to real literature. They did so, all right, and they had to follow Greece, Latin, and you can say Roman traditions at that time. So basically that was the thing, all right, that was basically they were in favor of the feelings of the heart instead of the logical thoughts which are located in the head. So previously that was an age of reason, this is an age of romance. So their focus is on heart, and previously they focused on head, everything which is based on reason, on logic, this and that. So here they focused on heart, on imagination, on romance, on love. All right. So some of the people say that this is a deliberate revolution that is made intentionally, okay, against the 18th century scientific worldview and the dominant poetic tradition of that time. So basically that is a revolution against the 18th century poetic tradition plus the scientific worldview of that time. All right. The main subject of the Romantic poets, so here we are talking about poets in general, what were basically their main subjects of that time: everyday life and the usage of plain language. So what do we mean by plain language here? That is the simple language. So basically their works are purely based on their daily life experiences, and they used daily life language as well. The humble person, the outcast, convicts, female and male vagrants, idiot boys, peasants, village barbers, peddlers and mothers, similar subjects were on the periphery of poetry before. The focus was on imagination. So basically these are the subject you can say of the poetry of that time, and these are, you can say, very universal subjects as well. Okay. So basically the point here is to focus on imagination, on everyday life, and on the usage of plain language as well. My dear students, let me remind you again, we are talking about the Romantic era. So here we are moving towards their themes and the kind of language they used at that time. Okay. Only Lord Byron among the Romantics stayed loyal to the poet's decorum and the aristocratic ways of old. So basically Lord Byron was the only one poet who stayed to the aristocratic ways of old. He didn't deal with the, you can say, the ordinary life, and he didn't use plain language as such. Peddlers and boats and wagons, oh yes, shades of Pope and Dryden are we come to this. Okay, Alexander Pope and John Dryden belong to the older poetic tradition. So here, my dear students, he is acknowledging Pope and Dryden here in this very verse. Okay, so we are talking about Lord Byron. So basically he was the only poet at that time who stayed royal to the poet's decorum and the aristocratic ways of old. So that is why he is acknowledging Pope and Dryden in his work as well. So basically these are the these two you can say personalities belong to the older poetic tradition as well. So my dear students, here you can see like Lord Byron was the only person who acknowledged the old poetic traditions. Okay, and you can see a clear color reflection of this in his writings, where he is acknowledging Pope and Dryden. All right. Lord Byron and David Duray, when you have read Disgrace, you'll be aware that there are many references to Lord Byron. In fact, Duray is in the process of writing an opera about Byron. So here we are talking about one more romantic poet of that time. So here in this work that is known as Disgrace, you will find out too many references to Lord Byron. So basically he was the person who used to write operas about Byron as well. Okay, so my dear students, here basically we'll just go for the exceptional cases first, as we did it before as well, the poets who did not follow the new trends or the new traditions or the new fashions in poetry or in other forms of literature. So when you say that Lord Byron is only one poet who did not follow the new fashions and the trends in poetry, so can we say that his works were not influential? So when we were talking about the 6 poets, the most influential poets during the Romantic era, so Lord Byron was also one of them. So how did he follow the how didn't he follow the new tradition or the new fashions in poetry, and still his name is written in history and he is also one of the romantic poets. Let me remind you one thing. When we talk about different eras in the history of English literature, so definitely we are focusing on the themes, on the language, and on the important works of that time. So here I'm talking about one exceptional case which is there in the Romantic era. The name of the person is Lord Byron, because he did not follow the new fashions or the new trends, literary trends, and he was still following the old poetic fashion. Alright, so aspects of Lord Byron's poetry influenced not only writers like Goethe, Balzac, Stendhal, Pushkin, Dostoevsky, Melville, but also painters and composers. For example, Beethoven. Okay, Lord Byron and his influence also extended to Emily and Charlotte Bronte. So my dear students, it doesn't mean like if he was not following the romantic trends while writing any kind of poetry or any kind of thing at that time, so still his works are very influential, and he did not only inspire the writers, but he also inspired the painters and composers of that time as well, and he has a strong influence on the writings of Emily and Charlotte Bronte as well. So we'll talk about these writers in detail as well. Alright, Emily Bronte's character Heathcliff in Wuthering Heights and Charlotte Bronte's Rochester in Jane Eyre have been described as Byronic heroes. So my dear students, when we will be talking about Wuthering Heights, and when you will be studying Wuthering Heights in modern novel or Jane Eyre, so my dear students, here you'll have to keep in mind the concept of Byronic hero as well. Alright, what characteristic does a Byronic hero have? So we'll talk about some of the characteristics of his hero. Okay, so when you talk about Emily Bronte's character, that is like Heathcliff, that this is the name of the character in the Wuthering Heights. This is a novel written by Emily Bronte, and Charlotte Bronte, Rochesters in Jane Eyre. You'll have to find out the qualities of Byronic hero in their characters as well. Alright, so now the question arises, what are the characteristics of the Byronic hero? In the Norton Anthology of English Literature Volume 2, that is 7th edition, the Byronic hero is described: he is an alien, mysterious and gloomy spirit, superior in his passions and powers to the common run of humanity, whom he regards with disdain. Okay, he harbors the torturing memory of an enormous nameless guilt that drives him towards an inevitable doom. He is in his isolation absolutely self-reliant, pursuing his own ends according to his self-generated moral code against any opposition, human or supernatural, and he exerts an attraction on other character that is the more compelling because it involves the terror at his obliviousness to ordinary human concerns and values. This figure, infusing the arch rebel in a non-political form with a strong erotic interest, was imitated in life as well as in art and helped shape the intellectual and the cultural society of the later 19th century as well. So the information you can see which is available in this book, you can find out the characteristics of Byronic hero as well, and which were later followed. So this tradition was later on followed by other novelists as well, and you can find out the Byronic hero in their writings as well. Alright, so this whole long description is that of a Byronic hero. Alright, okay, a hero which was used in Lord Byron's writings at that time. Okay, so you can see a reflection later on as well. My dear students, today's lecture has been taken from the Norton Anthology of English Literature, that is the 7th edition, Volume 2, The Romantic Period, 1785 to 1830, and you can find out the information on page 1 to 14. Okay, so this is the reference here. So my dear students, let me just revise the lecture for you. Actually, we were dealing with the Romantic era in history in general. So we took a start with the characteristics of Romantic era and its influence on music, art and literature. Then we discussed visual art and music as well, and what is basically the difference between classical and romantic traditions in the history of English literature. Then we moved towards literature, and then we focused on, we did not actually focus on the works, but I just gave you the names of the eminent poets of that time and what basically were their themes and how they violated the previous doctrine of writing poetry or any other form of literature. Previously in the classical literature, you could see the writers, they had to follow the Greek and the Roman traditions, and they had to follow certain guidelines while producing any kind of poetry at that time. So here you can see there is a revolution. We discussed too many other historical events as well. French Revolution was there, in industrial revolution was also there, and plus urbanization was there. Fine. So my dear students, you could see how those factors were involved in making the Romantic era, and you can see how did it divert the attention from being classical to romantic. All right. So basically this is, here poet is more spontaneous, he or she doesn't have to follow certain kinds of rules and regulations and to be within the limitations or the boundaries of rules to produce any kind of thing. Poets are free over here during the Romantic era, and the themes which they adopted most of the times in their writings were based on love, romance, and some of the things they took from the previous literatures as well, like chivalry and the courtly love. And you can see some of the elements of Shakespearean's poetry are some of the elements of Shakespearean poetry are also present in Romantic era. So here this is a revolution. So my dear students, you just have to keep in mind that Romantic period in the history of English literature is a revolutionary period as well. So by keeping in view this, we'll talk about the poets, the eminent poets during that era in the next lecture. All right. So I hope the concept of Romanticism is quite clear to you. Previously when I was talking about classicism, so I gave you a briefing about Romanticism as well at that time, but now I hope with the passage of time the points are getting clear to you. I just want to connect different lectures together, so in this way you can do the comparative study of different eras as well. Okay, what are basically the literary trends at that time, and either the poets they had the liberty at that time to cross the limitations of certain themes or to cross the boundaries of certain rules and regulations which they were supposed to follow while writing poetry. So basically you just have to keep these few things in your mind when you talk about history of English literature. So you can locate rest of the information from this book as well. Okay, we are over with the Romantic period, a brief introduction to the Romantic period, and that was started in 1785. I'm just repeating it, and ended in 1830. So according to it differs as well, like year difference you can see here, Romantic period, because some of the people they say the Romantic period was started with the publication of the lyrical ballads by S.T. Coleridge and William Wordsworth. Some of the people say that it was started before that. All right. So here, if you just get to know about the new dates to some extent, if the different dates, 2-3 year difference is there, so you don't need to get worried about it. You just need to have a concept, the basic concept of getting to know about literature by keeping in view that specific era that is very much important. So today we talked about the historical events as well which are involved. So I hope I provided you the basis for Romantic eras. So now we can discuss the Romantic period, which is a very, very important period in the history of English literature in quite detail now, and the things would be easy for you to digest as well. So my dear students, hope to see you again with a new lecture. Allah Hafiz.